The imperial palace of Draconis Prime stretched across 3 continents, its crystalline spires piercing the purple sky like frozen lightning. Within its vast corridors, servants scurried between marble pillars the size of ancient trees, their footsteps echoing in chambers that could house entire cities. The Dragon Emperor Vorthak ruled this domain with absolute authority, his scaled form commanding respect from billions across the galaxy. But in the medical wing's isolation chambers, far from the throne room's grandeur, lay a secret that brought shame to the imperial bloodline. Prince Zephyr, the emperor's youngest son, was what his people called a Sickling, born without the fire glands that made dragons the most feared species in known space. Where his siblings breathed plasma hot enough to melt starship hulls, Zephyr could barely produce warm air. His scales, instead of the brilliant crimson of royal blood, remained a dull bronze that marked him as defective. The medical staff had tried everything: genetic therapy, scale transplants, even experimental procedures that left the young prince writhing in agony for weeks. Nothing worked. The other dragons whispered that he was cursed, that the gods had marked the imperial line for some ancient sin. Emperor Vorthak, once proud of his many offspring, now pretended this particular son didn't exist. Marcus Chen had been cleaning the medical wing for 3 Earth years now. The human janitor kept his head down, did his work, and tried not to think about home. Earth had been conquered when he was barely 20, and humans were now scattered across the galaxy as servants, laborers, and worse. The dragons saw them as barely above animals, useful for menial tasks but lacking any real intelligence or worth. The job at the imperial palace was actually considered good by human standards. Regular meals, a small quarters in the servant levels, and mostly they left him alone as long as the floors stayed clean. Marcus had learned to move quietly through the halls, invisible to the dragons who barely acknowledged his existence. It was during his late-night shift in the medical wing that he first heard the crying. Soft, muffled sounds came from behind a door marked with symbols that warned of isolation protocols. Marcus knew enough dragon script to understand this was where they kept patients who were either highly contagious or deeply shameful to the Empire. He shouldn't have looked. Every instinct told him to keep mopping and mind his own business. But the sound was so human-like, so filled with loneliness that it made his chest ache. Humans weren't supposed to be in this wing at night. But the guard had stepped away and the automated systems only monitored for dragons. Pressing his face to the small window, Marcus saw something that made him gasp. A young dragon no bigger than a horse lay curled on a medical bed that was far too large for his frame. His scales were a strange bronze color instead of the usual crimson, and he was shaking with what looked like fever. Medical equipment surrounded the bed, but it was all switched off. No one was monitoring him. The dragon looked up at the sound, golden eyes meeting Marcus's brown ones through the glass. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then the dragon did something Marcus had never seen before. He smiled. Not the terrifying grin of a predator, but the weak, hopeful smile of someone who had been alone for too long. Marcus glanced around the empty corridor, then made a decision that would change everything. Using his maintenance codes, he accessed the door controls. The isolation chamber hissed open and he stepped inside. The dragon didn't attack or call for guards. Instead, he spoke in heavily accented but clear English. "You're human. I've read about your species, but I've never seen one up close. You can speak my language?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice low. "I can speak many languages. There's not much else to do in here except study." The dragon's voice was weak, barely above a whisper. "I'm Zephyr. I know I shouldn't tell you that, but I don't think it matters anymore." Marcus set down his cleaning supplies and approached the bed. The dragon Zephyr was obviously sick. His breathing was labored and his scales had a dull, lifeless quality. "When's the last time someone checked on you?" 3 days ago. The doctors say there's nothing more they can do." Zephyr coughed, a sound more like a wheeze than the rumbling roar dragons were known for. "I'm defective, you see. No fire, weak scales, constantly sick. I'm an embarrassment to the imperial bloodline." Something in the dragon's tone reminded Marcus of his younger brother, who had died during the conquest of Earth. That same resigned sadness, the acceptance that the world had decided you weren't worth saving. "That's not right. You're just a kid. I'm 16 in your years, old enough to understand what I am." Zephyr tried to sit up but failed, falling back against his pillows. "Why aren't you afraid of me? Humans are supposed to fear dragons." Marcus considered this. Hard to be afraid of someone who looks like they need help more than I do. He noticed a water dispenser in the corner that was empty. When's the last time you had something to drink? I don't remember, that decided it. Marcus filled the dispenser and brought Zephyr a cup of water, helping him drink. The dragon's gratitude was heartbreaking, as if this simple kindness was more than he'd received in years. I have to go, Marcus said finally, but I work this shift every night. If you want, I could stop by again. Zephyr's golden eyes brightened for the first time. You would do that? Even though I'm dragon royalty and you're supposed to hate us? You're not like them, Marcus said simply. You're just scared and alone. Nobody deserves that. As Marcus gathered his cleaning supplies and prepared to leave, Zephyr called out softly, Marcus, that's a human name, isn't it? How did you know my name? It's on your uniform badge. I told you I study everything I can. Marcus means warlike in your ancient languages, but you're the kindest person I've ever met. Walking back into the corridor, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since Earth fell: purpose. The Empire might see him as nothing more than a janitor, but to one lonely dragon prince, he had been the first person to show simple human compassion. He had no idea that this small act of kindness would eventually topple an empire and reshape the galaxy forever. Marcus returned the next night and the night after that. What started as brief visits to check on the sick prince gradually became longer conversations. Zephyr was hungry for interaction with someone who didn't see him as a failure or a disappointment. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying these talks. The young dragon was incredibly intelligent, well-read, and surprisingly funny when he wasn't dwelling on his circumstances. During their fourth meeting, Marcus brought something different. Hidden in his cleaning cart was a small container of soup he'd managed to save from the servant cafeteria. I noticed you barely touch the food they bring you, he said, offering the container to Zephyr. The dragon prince stared at the simple meal with wonder. This is human food? Vegetable soup. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and filling. Marcus helped Zephyr sit up properly. The stuff they're feeding you looks like it's designed for healthy dragons, not someone who's recovering from whatever's wrong with you. Zephyr tasted the soup tentatively, then began eating with genuine appetite. It's delicious. I haven't wanted to eat anything in weeks. He paused between spoonfuls. Marcus, why are you doing this? If they catch you here, you'll be executed. If they discover you're bringing me food, they might think you're trying to poison me. Marcus had been asking himself the same question. The rational part of his mind screamed that he was taking insane risks for someone who belonged to the species that had enslaved humanity. But watching Zephyr eat with such gratitude, seeing color return to his bronze scales, Marcus knew he couldn't stop now. My little brother was sick a lot when we were kids, Marcus said finally. Before the conquest. He had this genetic condition that made him weak, and the other kids used to pick on him. I promised myself I'd always protect people who couldn't protect themselves. What happened to him? He died when your people invaded Earth. Not in battle, he was in a hospital when they bombed the city. Marcus's voice stayed steady, but his hands clenched slightly. I'm not doing this for your empire, Zephyr. I'm doing it because you remind me of him. Zephyr set down the empty soup container, golden eyes serious. I'm sorry about your brother. And I'm sorry about what my people did to yours. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it. It was the first time any dragon had ever apologized to Marcus for the conquest. The sincerity in Zephyr's voice caught him off guard. You weren't responsible for that war. My father was. My brothers are training to be just like him. Zephyr's voice turned bitter. Sometimes I think being defective is a blessing. At least I'll never become a conqueror. Over the following weeks, their friendship deepened. Marcus learned that Zephyr had been essentially abandoned by his family since his condition became apparent. The dragon prince spent his days reading everything he could access through the palace's information networks, desperate to prove his worth through intelligence since physical prowess was denied to him. I've been studying human history, Zephyr said one night. His health noticeably improved, thanks to Marcus's regular visits and proper nutrition. Your species is fascinating. You've survived ice ages, plagues, wars that should have destroyed you completely. Yet you keep rebuilding, keep hoping. Stubborn, you mean, Marcus said with a smile. Humans are too stupid to know when to give up. No, not stupid. Resilient. Even now, after the conquest, I read reports of human communities helping each other, sharing resources, protecting the weak. Dragons don't do that. We compete, we dominate, we abandon those who can't keep up. Zephyr's voice grew thoughtful. I think that's why we needed to conquer you. Deep down, we know you're better than us. Marcus was surprised by this insight. Better at losing wars, maybe. Better at being people, Zephyr corrected. We're predators who learn to use technology. You're a species that chose to become more than your nature intended. Their conversations weren't always philosophical. Zephyr was still a teenager, delighted by Marcus's stories of Earth culture, human foods, and the strange customs that dragons found incomprehensible. In return, he shared knowledge of the galaxy beyond Earth, describing worlds Marcus could barely imagine. There are human colonies out there, Zephyr said during one late-night talk. Places my father's empire hasn't reached yet. Sometimes I wonder what they're like, building their own societies without dragons watching over them. Free, Marcus said simply. They're free. It was during their 6th week of secret meetings that everything changed. Marcus arrived to find Zephyr in obvious distress, his breathing labored and his scales dull again. What's wrong? You were getting better. The doctors came today, Zephyr gasped. They're planning something called genetic purification therapy. They want to try one more experimental treatment. Fear filled his golden eyes. Marcus, I've read about this procedure. The survival rate is less than 20%. Marcus felt cold anger building in his chest. They're going to kill you. They're going to try to fix me. If I die in the process, well, that solves the embarrassment problem too. Zephyr tried to laugh, but it came out as a painful wheeze. The treatment starts tomorrow. No. The word came out more forcefully than Marcus intended. This is insane. You're getting better with proper food and care. This treatment sounds like murder with extra steps. I don't have a choice. The Emperor himself ordered it. Zephyr reached out weakly, his clawed hand touching Marcus's arm. Thank you for these weeks. You gave me the first real friendship I've ever had. I won't forget that. Marcus stared at the young dragon who had become like a brother to him. Zephyr was right, he was getting better. Not becoming a fire-breathing warrior, but healthier, stronger, more alive than when they'd first met. The dragons saw this as failure because he'd never be what they expected, but Marcus saw it as proof that different didn't mean broken. There has to be another way, Marcus said, his mind racing. There isn't. Even if there were, where could someone like me go? I'm a dragon prince who can't breathe fire. I don't exactly blend in. But Marcus was already thinking beyond the immediate problem. His maintenance access gave him clearance throughout the palace. He knew the guard schedules, the security protocols, even the transportation systems. And more importantly, he was invisible to the dragons, just another human servant they barely noticed. What if you didn't have to be a dragon prince? Marcus asked slowly. What do you mean? What if you could just be Zephyr, free to be whatever you wanted to become, without anyone trying to fix you or kill you for being different? For the first time since Marcus had known him, Zephyr looked truly hopeful. You're talking about escape. That's impossible. Human specialty, Marcus said with a grin. Doing the impossible. Marcus spent the rest of that night planning. By morning, he had a rough escape route mapped out in his mind, but he needed help. The kind of help that only came from other humans who understood what it meant to risk everything for someone who mattered. The servant quarters were located deep beneath the palace, a maze of cramped corridors and shared sleeping spaces that dragons rarely bothered to visit. Marcus found Elena Vasquez in the laundry section, her weathered hands sorting through silk robes that cost more than most humans would see in a lifetime. I need a favor, Marcus said without preamble. A big one. Elena looked up, her dark eyes immediately suspicious. She'd been in the palace longer than Marcus, and survival meant not trusting anyone completely. What kind of favor gets people killed? The kind that saves someone who doesn't deserve to die. Elena set down the robe she'd been folding. You're talking about the prince, aren't you? The sick one they keep in isolation? Marcus tried not to show his surprise. How did you know? You think the human staff doesn't notice when someone starts taking extra food rations? Or when cleaning supplies go missing from the medical wing? Elena's expression softened slightly. We also notice when someone starts looking less hopeless. You've been different these past weeks. He's just a kid, Elena. They're going to kill him with some experimental treatment that has almost no chance of working. And you want to do what exactly? Smuggle a dragon prince off Draconis Prime? Elena laughed bitterly. Marcus, I respect what you're trying to do, but this is suicide. Maybe. But I can't watch them murder him when I know he could live a normal life if they'd just leave him alone. Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. I've got access codes and guard schedules. I know how to get him out of the medical wing, but I need help getting him off planet. Elena was quiet for a long moment, her hands absently smoothing the fabric in front of her. There's a supply ship that comes every 10 days. Captain Rodriguez, he's human, works for the Dragons, but still has some conscience left. He might help if we can make it worth his while. When's the next shipment? Tomorrow night. Same time they're scheduled to start the prince's treatment. Elena met his eyes. You're really going to do this, aren't you? Yes, Elena sighed. Then you'll need these. She reached into her work bag and pulled out a small bundle of cloth. Servant robes in extra small. If anyone asks, they're for the new kitchen staff who haven't arrived yet. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude. Why are you helping me? Because 20 years ago, when the Dragons first took Earth, a human stranger helped my daughter escape one of their labor camps. I never found out what happened to either of them. Elena's voice grew quiet. Maybe this is how karma works. We save each other when we can. The next evening, Marcus's heart pounded as he made his way to the medical wing. This was it. Either they succeeded or they all died trying. He'd spent the day memorizing guard rotations and identifying the least monitored exit routes. The supply ship would dock at midnight, giving them a narrow window to reach the cargo bay. Zephyr was awake when Marcus entered the isolation chamber, but he looked worse than ever. The pre-treatment medications had left him weak and disoriented. Marcus, I thought I dreamed you were here earlier. Not a dream. We're leaving right now. Marcus pulled out the servant robes Elena had provided. Can you walk? I think so. But Marcus, this is insane. If they catch us, they won't catch us. Marcus helped Zephyr sit up, noting how much lighter the dragon felt than when they'd first met. Trust me. Getting Zephyr dressed in human clothing was surreal. The robes were loose enough to hide his unusual proportions, and a hood covered his distinctive scaled head. In the dim corridors, he might pass for a very tall, very thin human, as long as no one looked too closely. The journey through the palace was terrifying. Every shadow could hide a guard, every sound might be an alarm. Marcus used his maintenance routes, avoiding the main corridors where security was tightest. Zephyr moved quietly despite his weakness, years of isolation having taught him to be unobtrusive. They were halfway to the docking bay when disaster struck. A patrol of dragon guards rounded the corner ahead of them, their crimson scales gleaming in the artificial light. Marcus's heart stopped, but training kicked in. He was a servant, invisible to dragons unless they needed something. Keep your head down and follow my lead, he whispered to Zephyr. As the guards approached, Marcus stepped forward slightly, making himself the focus of their attention. Excuse me, my lords. Medical Waste Disposal Service. We're taking contaminated materials to the incinerator. The lead guard barely glanced at them. Proceed. They walked past the patrol with measured steps, Marcus fighting every instinct that screamed at him to run. Once the guards were out of sight, Zephyr sagged against the wall. I can't believe that worked, he breathed. Being invisible has its advantages. Marcus checked his chronometer. We've got 15 minutes to reach the docking bay. Captain Rodriguez was a middle-aged man with calloused hands and suspicious eyes. He looked at the hooded figure behind Marcus with obvious concern. You didn't tell me you were smuggling cargo this big, he said in rapid Spanish. He's sick, not dangerous, Marcus replied in the same language. And we can pay. With what? Human servants don't exactly earn salaries. Marcus had anticipated this. He pulled out a small device he'd taken from the medical wing, a portable scanner worth more than most ships. Medical equipment untraceable. Rodriguez examined the device, then nodded slowly. Get him into cargo hold 3, and pray to whatever god you believe in that we don't get searched. The cargo hold was cramped and cold, filled with supply containers that blocked most of the light. Marcus helped Zephyr settle behind a stack of boxes, trying to make him as comfortable as possible for what could be a long journey. Where are we going? Zephyr asked. I don't know yet. Rodriguez says there's a neutral station about 3 days from here. We'll figure out the rest when we get there. As the ship's engines began to rumble, Zephyr grabbed Marcus's hand. I'm scared. I've never been away from the palace. I know. I'm scared too. Marcus squeezed the dragon's clawed fingers gently. But fear means you're alive. And alive means there's still hope. The ship lifted off smoothly, and Marcus felt the artificial gravity adjust as they broke free of Draconis Prime's atmosphere. Through a small porthole, he could see the planet shrinking below them, the only home either of them had ever known. "We did it," Zephyr whispered in amazement. "We actually escaped." But Marcus knew their real challenges were just beginning. They were fugitives now, a human and a dragon prince on the run from the most powerful empire in the galaxy. They had no money, no allies, and no plan beyond getting as far away as possible. Yet looking at Zephyr's face, filled with wonder as he saw stars from space for the first time, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since Earth fell. He felt like he was finally doing something that mattered. The neutral trading station Harmony Point drifted in the void between territories, a massive structure built from salvaged ships and forgotten dreams. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions and everyone minded their own business, perfect for fugitives trying to disappear. Captain Rodriguez had been true to his word, getting them safely off his ship and pointing them toward the station's less monitored sections. "You've got maybe 48 hours before Imperial bounty hunters start checking neutral stations," he'd warned. "Whatever you're planning, do it fast." Marcus and Zephyr found refuge in a cheap boarding house that rented rooms by the hour to smugglers and refugees. The proprietor, a blue-skinned Kepler with cybernetic eyes, took their payment in trade goods and asked no questions about the tall figure who kept his hood up. "Now what?" Zephyr asked once they were safely behind a locked door. The journey had exhausted him, and his bronze scales had gone dull again. Marcus was wondering the same thing. They had enough credits for maybe a week of food and shelter, no identification papers that would pass serious scrutiny, and nowhere to go that wasn't controlled by the Dragon Empire. He'd acted on impulse to save Zephyr, but now reality was setting in. "First, you need to rest and get your strength back," Marcus said, helping Zephyr settle onto the narrow bed. "Then we figure out our next move." "There is no next move," Zephyr said quietly. "I appreciate what you've done, Marcus, but we both know this is hopeless. The Empire controls most of known space. There's nowhere to run where they won't eventually find us." Marcus wanted to argue, but Zephyr was right. The Dragon Empire had spent centuries expanding across the galaxy, crushing any civilization that resisted and enslaving those that surrendered. Even the neutral zones existed only because the dragons found them useful. But as he watched Zephyr struggle with exhaustion and despair, Marcus remembered something his grandfather had told him years ago. "When you can't go around an obstacle, sometimes you have to go through it." "What do you mean?" "The Empire is looking for a dragon prince and his human accomplice. What if that's not who we are anymore?" Marcus spent the next day exploring Harmony Point's black market, using their remaining credits to buy forged identification documents and basic medical supplies. The station was a maze of vendors selling everything from illegal weapons to stolen memories, all of it floating in a legal gray area that the major powers chose to ignore. It was in a dingy electronics shop that Marcus found what he was looking for. The vendor was a heavily modified human, whose arms had been replaced with mechanical appendages capable of precision work that biological hands couldn't match. "I need something that can change appearance," Marcus said carefully. "Holographic projection, maybe biomimetic gel." The vendor's enhanced eyes whirred as they focused on him. "That's expensive tech. What are you trying to hide?" "Nothing illegal. Just need to blend in better." "Right?" The vendor laughed harshly. "Everything on this station is illegal somewhere. You want my advice? Don't try to look like something you're not. Instead, look like something nobody cares about." He gestured to a display case filled with medical devices. Prosthetics, mobility aids, therapeutic equipment. People look away from disability because it makes them uncomfortable, makes you invisible. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Marcus purchased a basic holographic disguise system and several pieces of mobility equipment, then returned to their room to find Zephyr studying news feeds on the room's terminal. "They're calling it a kidnapping," Zephyr said without looking up. "Official story is that human terrorists infiltrated the palace and abducted me for ransom. That's actually good news. It means they don't want to admit you left willingly. There's more. My father has posted a bounty for my return, alive and unharmed. 50 million Imperial credits." Marcus whistled softly. "That was enough money to buy a small planet. That changes things. With that kind of reward, every bounty hunter in the galaxy will be looking for us. Which is why I've been thinking." Zephyr turned to face him, golden eyes determined. "You should turn me in." "What?" "Think about it, Marcus. 50 million credits would set you up for life. You could buy passage to one of those free human colonies, start over wherever you wanted." "Absolutely not." "Why?" You barely knew me before all this started. I'm just some sick dragon who can't even breathe fire properly. You risked everything to save me, but you don't owe me your whole life." Marcus sat on the bed next to his friend, choosing his words carefully. "When I was a kid, my dad told me something I never forgot. He said the measure of a person isn't what they can do, but what they choose to do when it matters. I don't understand. You had every reason to hate humans. We're the conquered species, the servants and slaves of your empire, but you chose to see me as a person worth talking to. You chose friendship over prejudice." Marcus met Zephyr's gaze. "That choice saved my life just as much as mine saved yours." "How did it save your life?" "I was dying inside, Zephyr. Going through the motions of survival but not really living. You gave me purpose again, reminded me that there are still things worth fighting for." Zephyr was quiet for a long moment. "So what do we do now?" Marcus pulled out the equipment he'd bought. "Now we become people who don't exist. I've got holographic projectors that can alter your appearance and mobility aids that will change how you move. To everyone else, you'll just be a disabled Altarian getting medical treatment. Altarians look nothing like dragons. The holoprojectors will handle the visual differences. The medical equipment gives us a reason for you to move slowly and stay covered up. Plus, Altarians are known for being reclusive. Nobody will question why you don't want to talk to strangers." Over the next several hours, Marcus helped Zephyr practice with the disguise. The holographic system created the illusion of pale blue skin and elongated limbs typical of the Altarian species, while the mobility aids explained any remaining inconsistencies in his movement. "It's not perfect," Marcus said, studying the effect. "But it should fool casual observation. What about you?" Marcus had already started altering his own appearance with temporary dyes and prosthetics. "I'll be your human caregiver. Lots of wealthy Altarians employ human medical assistants." "And where are we going?" "The Rim territories. There are human settlements out there that the Empire hasn't bothered with yet. Too far from anything important to be worth the trouble of conquest. That's a long journey from here. We'll need passage on multiple ships, and that costs money we don't have." Marcus smiled grimly. "Actually, we do have money. Remember that medical scanner I traded to Rodriguez? I took it from a restricted research lab. The data on it is worth a fortune to the right buyer." "You stole Imperial research data?" "I borrowed it. Consider it payment for all those years of slave labor." As they prepared to leave Harmony Point, Zephyr caught Marcus's arm. "Are you sure about this? Once we go, there's no going back. You'll never be able to return to human space." "Human space belongs to dragons now," Marcus replied. "I'd rather build something new with a friend than live as a slave in what used to be home." They left the station on a freight hauler bound for the frontier. Just 2 more passengers among dozens of refugees, traders and dreamers heading for the galaxy's edge. Behind them, the Dragon Empire continued its eternal expansion, unaware that it had just lost something more valuable than territory or resources. It had lost the chance to learn what humans and dragons could become when they chose cooperation over conquest. The settlement of New Geneva existed in defiance of logic, carved into the side of a mountain on a planet that barely supported life. The air was thin, the soil poor, and the nearest jump gate was 2 weeks away by slow freighter. It was exactly the kind of place the Dragon Empire ignored, too remote and worthless to bother conquering. Marcus and Zephyr had been living there for 8 months now, and both had changed in ways that surprised them. Zephyr's health had improved dramatically in the clean air and low gravity. His bronze scales had developed a lustrous sheen, and while he still couldn't breathe fire, he'd grown stronger and more confident. The holographic disguise had become unnecessary. Within the settlement, the 300 humans who called New Geneva home had quickly learned to accept their unusual new residents. The mining equipment is working better than expected. Dr. Sarah Chen reported at the weekly community meeting. She was no relation to Marcus despite the shared name, but they'd bonded over their engineering backgrounds. "We should be able to extract enough rare minerals to trade for supplies within the month." Marcus nodded from his seat near the back of the meeting hall. Beside him, Zephyr listened intently to the discussion of irrigation systems and power grid improvements. The Dragon Prince had thrown himself into learning about human society with the same intensity he'd once applied to his isolated studies. After the meeting, the 3 of them walked back toward the small workshop where Marcus and Zephyr had been working on improvements to the settlement's technology. It was amazing what you could accomplish when you combined human ingenuity with dragon theoretical knowledge. I've been thinking about the communication array, Zephyr said as they climbed the winding path to their workshop. If we could boost the signal strength by 40%, we might be able to reach some of the other settlements Dr. Chen mentioned. Other settlements? Sarah raised an eyebrow. What other settlements? There are 17 independent human colonies within a 50-light-year radius, Zephyr explained matter-of-factly. Most are struggling with resource shortages or technical problems that could be solved with better coordination. Marcus stopped walking. How do you know that? I've been monitoring Imperial communication channels in my spare time. The Empire tracks all human settlements, even the ones they consider too insignificant to bother with. Zephyr's expression grew thoughtful. I think they're planning something. That evening, in the privacy of their shared dwelling, Marcus and Zephyr spread out the data Zephyr had been collecting. The young dragon had been busy, intercepting and decoding Imperial transmissions with skills learned during his years of isolation. Look at this pattern, Zephyr said, pointing to a star map covered with markers. Every independent human settlement, cataloged and monitored. They're not moving against them yet, but they're preparing. Preparing for what? A sweep operation. Once the Empire finishes consolidating their core territories, they'll move outward again. All these little colonies will be absorbed or destroyed. Marcus studied the map with growing alarm. How long do we have? Based on their current expansion rate and resource allocation, maybe 2 years. 3 at most. That's not enough time for these settlements to build proper defenses. No, Zephyr agreed, but it might be enough time for something else. Marcus looked at his friend questioningly. An alliance. These colonies are struggling in isolation, but together they might have a chance. Zephyr's eyes gleamed with an excitement Marcus hadn't seen since their escape. We could help them coordinate, share resources and technology. Build something the Empire can't just sweep aside? We, Zephyr, you're talking about organizing a resistance against your father's empire. My father's empire enslaved humanity and would have killed me for being different. I don't owe it any loyalty. Zephyr's voice grew firm. Besides, I've learned something these past months that I never understood before. What's that? Humans don't just survive, Marcus. You adapt, you grow, you become something better than what you were before. You've taught me that being different isn't a weakness, it's a strength. Over the following weeks, they reached out carefully to other settlements, using Zephyr's knowledge of Imperial communication protocols to establish secure channels. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Colony after colony reported the same problems: isolation, resource shortages, and the constant fear of Imperial discovery. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been right about karma. The kindness Marcus had shown to a lonely dragon prince was now rippling outward, connecting scattered human communities across the galaxy's edge. The first inter-colony summit was held via encrypted quantum communication. With representatives from 12 settlements participating, Marcus found himself serving as coordinator, while Zephyr provided technical expertise and strategic intelligence. The Centauri mining colony has excess rare earth elements but needs medical supplies, reported Captain Torres from New Harmony. Meanwhile, the agricultural settlement on Kepler 442b has surplus food, but their water purification systems are failing. We can facilitate those trades, Marcus said, but we need to think bigger. Individual resource sharing isn't enough to build a real defense network. It was Zephyr who proposed the solution that would change everything. What if we didn't just share resources? What if we shared knowledge? Explain, said Dr. Kim from the research station on Wolf 359. Humans have been scattered across the galaxy for 20 years now. You've adapted to dozens of different environments, solved thousands of unique problems, but most of that knowledge stays isolated in individual colonies. Zephyr's voice grew excited. Imagine if we could combine all of it. The idea was elegant in its simplicity, a shared database of human innovation, accessible to all allied settlements. Agricultural techniques developed on one world could be adapted for use on another. Medical breakthroughs, engineering solutions, cultural innovations, all of it connected and growing. It's like the old internet, but decentralized, breathed Dr. Chen. No single point of failure. More than that, Marcus added, understanding Zephyr's vision. It's like an immune system. Each settlement becomes stronger, but the network as a whole becomes something new entirely. Within 6 months, the Human Frontier Alliance had grown from 12 settlements to over 30. Trade routes were established, defended by converted mining ships and agricultural haulers. The shared knowledge base accelerated technological development at a rate that surprised even Zephyr. But it was the cultural changes that truly amazed Marcus. The settlements weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving. Art, music, literature, and philosophy flourished as communities that had been focused purely on survival suddenly had the resources and connections to pursue higher aspirations. "We're not just rebuilding human civilization," Sarah observed during one of their planning sessions. "We're building something better than what existed before." "How so?" Marcus asked. "Before the conquest, Earth's nations competed and fought with each other. Out here, we have to cooperate or we die. We're learning to see differences as strengths instead of threats." Zephyr looked up from the communication array he was calibrating. "That sounds familiar?" "Someone once told me that being different isn't a weakness." Marcus smiled at his friend. Smart guy, whoever said that. But even as the alliance grew stronger, they all knew it was only a matter of time before the Empire noticed. The question was whether they could build something strong enough to survive that attention when it came. Unknown to them, that attention was already beginning to focus. Deep in the Imperial Palace on Draconis Prime, Emperor Vorthak was receiving reports of unusual human activity in the Rim territories. His missing son's bounty remained unclaimed, and intelligence suggested something was happening in the frontier regions that deserved investigation. The Dragon Empire was beginning to stir, and when it did, the Human Frontier Alliance would face its first real test. The first Imperial probe ship arrived at the edge of Human Frontier Alliance space on a Tuesday morning, its sleek black hull reflecting the light of distant stars. Admiral Sarah Chen, formerly Dr. Chen and now military coordinator for the Alliance, watched its approach on the main display of the converted mining platform that served as their central command station. Single ship, Imperial design, broadcasting standard identification protocols, reported Lieutenant Martinez from the sensor station. They're requesting permission to enter Alliance space for a routine survey. Routine survey of what? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. He stood beside Admiral Chen, still wearing his simple mechanics coveralls despite now holding the title of Alliance Coordinator. "Us," Zephyr said quietly from his position at the communications console. The Dragon Prince had become the Alliance's chief intelligence officer, his knowledge of Imperial procedures invaluable in preparing for this moment. "They know we're here. The question is how much they know." Admiral Chen studied the tactical display. Around them, the Alliance had grown to encompass 47 settlements and colonies, connected by trade routes protected by a fleet of modified civilian ships. It was impressive for what it was, but compared to Imperial military might, it was still just a collection of refugees playing at being a nation. "What are our options?" Chen asked. "We can let them in and hope they buy our cover story about being a simple trading cooperative," Marcus said. "Or we can deny them entry and confirm their suspicions that we're hiding something." "Third option," Zephyr added. "We could tell them the truth." The command center fell silent. Everyone knew what Zephyr meant, but no one wanted to voice it. "You want to reveal yourself," Admiral Chen said finally, "after 2 years of hiding." "Think about it from their perspective," Zephyr explained, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was proposing. "They're looking for a kidnapped prince and his terrorist accomplice. What they've found instead is a thriving human alliance that's managed to remain hidden from Imperial intelligence for 2 years. That's either very good luck or very good leadership." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Zephyr, if you reveal yourself now, they'll arrest you. Your father will either execute you publicly or lock you away forever." "Maybe. Or maybe he'll listen when I explain what we've built here." Zephyr turned to face the assembled command staff. How many settlements were starving when we found them? How many were on the verge of collapse? Now look at what they've become. The data was undeniable. The Human Frontier Alliance had transformed isolated, struggling colonies into a network of prosperous communities. Trade had flourished, technology had advanced, and for the first time since the conquest of Earth, humans were building something that belonged to them. "The Empire rules through fear and domination," Zephyr continued. "But what if there was another way? What if they could see that cooperation creates something stronger than conquest?" "You're talking about changing the fundamental nature of a galactic empire," Admiral Chen said skeptically, "one that spent centuries perfecting the art of subjugation. Empires change when they have to, and right now, the Dragon Empire is facing something it's never encountered before: human ingenuity freed from the constraints of oppression. The probe ship was now holding position at the edge of Alliance space, waiting for a response to its request. Every minute of delay would increase suspicion. "If we do this," Marcus said slowly, "if you reveal yourself, there's no going back. The Alliance will be exposed and everything we've built could be destroyed, or it could be the beginning of something greater." Zephyr's golden eyes met Marcus's. 2 years ago, you risked everything to save one sick dragon. Are you willing to risk it again to save 47 human worlds? Marcus looked around the command center at the faces of people who had become family. These were refugees who had built something remarkable through cooperation and shared purpose. They deserved better than to live in fear of Imperial discovery. "Admiral Chen, open a channel to the probe ship," Marcus said. "Full visual." "Marcus, no," Admiral Chen protested. "We're not ready for this. We'll never be ready." But Zephyr's right. They're going to find us eventually anyway. Better to control how that happens. The main display flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Imperial probe ship. A dragon officer with crimson scales and gold rank insignia stared out at them with obvious surprise. "I am Captain Korath of the Imperial Navy," the dragon said formally. "You are broadcasting from Alliance space, but I see no registered Alliance in our databases." "Please identify yourselves." Marcus stepped forward. "I am Marcus Chen, coordinator of the Human Frontier Alliance. We are a cooperative of independent human settlements in the Rim territories. Independent human settlements are not permitted without Imperial oversight," Captain Korath replied, his tone growing stern. "You will prepare to be boarded for inspection and registration." "Captain," Zephyr said, moving into view of the camera. He had disabled his holographic disguise, revealing his distinctive bronze scales and royal bearing. "I believe we should discuss this situation before any boarding actions are taken." Captain Korath's eyes widened in shock. Every dragon in the Empire would recognize Prince Zephyr, even after 2 years. "Your Highness? You're alive! Imperial Command has been searching for you across the galaxy." "I'm aware of that, Captain. I'm also aware that my father has assumed I was kidnapped by human terrorists." You weren't?" "I was rescued by a human who saw a sick person in need of help, regardless of species. That rescue became the foundation for everything you see here." Marcus watched Captain Korath struggle to process this information. The official Imperial narrative was that humans were inferior beings incapable of complex thought or genuine emotion. Yet here was proof that a human had risked his life to save a dragon prince, asking for nothing in return. "Your Highness, I must report your location to Imperial Command immediately." "Of course. But before you do, I'd like to show you something." Zephyr gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the full scope of the Alliance. 47 human settlements connected by trade routes and mutual cooperation. Combined population of over 3 million. 0 conflicts, 0 wars, 0 instances of oppression or exploitation. How is that possible? Because humans don't just survive, Captain. They adapt, they grow, they become something better. Given freedom and resources, they've built something the Empire has never achieved. A truly peaceful, prosperous society. Captain Korath studied the display with obvious fascination. "But they're just humans. Our scientists have proven they lack the intelligence for complex social organization." "Your scientists were wrong," Marcus said bluntly. "We're not inferior, Captain. We're different. And difference, when it's valued instead of feared, becomes strength." The conversation continued for hours, with Zephyr and Marcus taking turns explaining the Alliance's structure and achievements. Captain Korath asked increasingly complex questions, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to something that might have been wonder. Finally, the dragon captain leaned back in his command chair. "Your Highness, this is far beyond my authority to handle. I must notify Emperor Vorthak immediately." "I understand," Zephyr said. "But Captain, when you make that report, please include everything you've seen here. Not just my location, but what humans are capable of when they're free to reach their potential." As the channel closed, Marcus felt the weight of what they'd just done. Within days, the full might of the Dragon Empire would know about the Alliance. They had perhaps weeks before Imperial fleets arrived to decide their fate. "Think it will work?" Admiral Chen asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But at least now we're not hiding anymore." Zephyr placed a clawed hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Whatever happens next, we face it together. All of us." Looking out at the stars where human settlements were flourishing, Marcus felt a familiar sense of purpose. They had built something worth fighting for. Now they would discover if it was strong enough to survive the coming storm. Emperor Vorthak's throne room had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, but it had never been as silent as it was now. The massive dragon ruler sat motionless on his crystalline throne, golden eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the Human Frontier Alliance. Around him, his advisors waited nervously for his reaction to Captain Korath's report. 47 worlds, the Emperor said finally, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. 3 million humans, all of it built around my defective son. Your Majesty, ventured General Thrax, the Empire's military commander. We can have a fleet at their location within a week. The humans have no real defenses. We could retake Prince Zephyr and disperse their alliance easily. Could we? Vorthak stood, his massive form casting shadows across the throne room. General, how many rebellions have we crushed in the past century? Dozens, Your Majesty. Human resistance is common but easily suppressed. And how many of those rebellions involved millions of coordinated humans working together peacefully for over 2 years? General Thrax was quiet for a moment. None, Your Majesty. Precisely. The Emperor began pacing, his claws clicking on the marble floor. Every human uprising we've faced has been driven by desperation and hatred. They fight because they have nothing left to lose. But this alliance, they're not fighting at all, they're building. Your Majesty, interrupted Prime Minister Zarkoth, surely you're not considering legitimizing this illegal settlement network? I'm considering the implications of what my son has discovered. Vorthak paused before a massive window overlooking the imperial capital. We rule through fear because we assumed that was the only way to control inferior species. But what if we were wrong about their inferiority? The throne room erupted in shocked murmurs. The idea that humans might be more than simple animals challenged the fundamental ideology of the Dragon Empire. Your Majesty, General Thrax said carefully, even if humans are more intelligent than we believed, they're still a conquered species. Allowing them independence sets a dangerous precedent, does it? Or does it demonstrate the Empire's strength and wisdom? Vorthak turned back to face his advisors. Tell me, General, what have we gained from enslaving humanity? Manual labor, military conscripts, territorial expansion? All things we could have obtained through trade and alliance, the Emperor interrupted. At far less cost and with no ongoing resistance movements. Prime Minister Zarkoth looked alarmed. Your Majesty, you cannot seriously be considering granting the humans independence. I'm considering meeting with my son to understand what he's learned. Vorthak's voice carried a tone of finality that ended all discussion. Prepare my personal ship. I'm going to see this alliance for myself. Meanwhile, in the Alliance Command Center, Marcus was coordinating the largest evacuation in human history. Word of the Emperor's approach had spread through all 47 settlements, triggering emergency protocols that would disperse the population before the Imperial fleet arrived. New Geneva reports full evacuation complete, Admiral Chen announced. 15,000 civilians relocated to the deep space mining stations. Kepler 442b is finishing their evacuation now, added Lieutenant Martinez. Final transport leaves in 6 hours. Marcus nodded grimly. They had always known this day might come, and preparations had been made to preserve the alliance even if its fixed settlements were destroyed. But watching their carefully built civilization dismantle itself in panic was heartbreaking. There's something else, Zephyr said from his monitoring station. The Imperial fleet approaching us, it's not a military formation. What do you mean? Single ship, Imperial designation, Sovereign's will. That's my father's personal vessel. Zephyr's voice carried a mixture of fear and hope. He's coming himself. Admiral Chen looked skeptical. Could be a trap. Send the Emperor's ship to lull us into complacency, while the real fleet approaches from another vector. No, Zephyr said firmly. My father has many flaws, but deception isn't one of them. If he wanted to destroy us, he'd send the fleet openly. The fact that he's coming alone means he wants to talk. Marcus felt a strange mixture of terror and anticipation. Everything they had built, everything they had fought for would be decided in the next few hours. The Sovereign's will dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Alliance territory exactly when predicted. Unlike Captain Korath's probe ship, this vessel announced itself immediately and requested permission to approach the command station. Permission granted, Marcus said, though his mouth was dry. Your Majesty, This is Marcus Chen. I believe you want to speak with your son. Emperor Vorthak's image appeared on the main display, and Marcus was struck by how much Zephyr resembled his father. The same golden eyes, the same intelligent expression, though the Emperor's scales were the deep crimson of royalty, rather than Zephyr's distinctive bronze. Marcus Chen, the Emperor said, studying him carefully. The human who allegedly kidnapped my son. The human who helped your son escape a treatment that would have killed him, Marcus corrected. Your Majesty. And in doing so, you accidentally created the largest human civilization since Earth's conquest. There was no anger in Vorthak's voice, only curiosity. I find myself wanting to understand how. Dad. Zephyr moved into view of the camera, and Marcus saw something he'd never witnessed before, uncertainty in the Dragon Prince's expression. I know this isn't what you expected when you sent me for treatment. Expected? Emperor Vorthak laughed, a sound like distant thunder. Zephyr, nothing about you has ever been what I expected. I sent you for treatment because I thought you were broken. Instead, you've proven that the entire empire might be broken. I don't understand. Captain Korath's report was very thorough. 47 human settlements thriving without oppression or conflict. Agricultural worlds feeding mining colonies. Research stations sharing discoveries with manufacturing centers. All of it coordinated by humans we assumed were barely intelligent. The Emperor paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a weight Marcus hadn't expected. Do you know how many dragon worlds are currently experiencing civil unrest? How many of our client species are in open revolt? We maintain order through constant military intervention, yet these humans have built something we've never achieved. Genuine peace. Because we chose cooperation over conquest, Marcus said. Because we value differences instead of eliminating them. Yes, Vorthak said slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. His gaze shifted to Zephyr. And you, my son, learned this lesson because you were different yourself. Dad, I'm still defective. I can't breathe fire, my scales are the wrong color, I'll never be the warrior you wanted. No, the Emperor agreed. You're something better. You're a bridge between species. A proof that strength comes in many forms. Vorthak's expression grew thoughtful. Tell me, could this alliance you've built be expanded? Could it include dragons who chose cooperation over conquest? The command center fell completely silent. Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized the magnitude of what the Emperor was suggesting. You want to join the alliance? Zephyr asked in amazement. I want to transform the Empire into something worthy of the galaxy we rule, Vorthak replied. We've spent centuries proving we could conquer. Perhaps it's time to prove we can build. Over the following months, the transformation was gradual but unmistakable. The Dragon Empire didn't disappear overnight, but it began changing in fundamental ways. Human settlements were granted autonomy, client species were offered partnership instead of subjugation, and the imperial military shifted from conquest to protection. Zephyr became the first ambassador of interspecies cooperation, traveling between worlds to help establish new alliance protocols. Marcus found himself appointed as Director of Human Affairs, coordinating the integration of former imperial territories into the expanding alliance. But the most important change was philosophical. The empire had been built on the assumption that difference meant threat, that diversity was weakness to be eliminated. The new alliance was founded on the opposite principle, that diversity was strength to be celebrated. Standing on the observation deck of the new alliance headquarters, Marcus watched ships from dozens of species dock at the massive station. Human vessels worked alongside dragon cruisers, while cargo haulers from 100 different worlds delivered goods and passengers to their new shared future. Hard to believe it all started with a sick dragon and a human janitor, Zephyr said, joining Marcus at the viewing port. Actually, it started with a choice, Marcus corrected. The choice to help someone who needed it regardless of who they were or where they came from. Think it will last? This alliance we've built, Marcus smiled, watching a human child and a young dragon play together in the station's public gardens. As long as people remember that being different isn't something to fear, it's something to celebrate. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but for the first time since he'd left Earth, Marcus felt genuinely hopeful about the future. They had proven that enemies could become friends, that the conquered could work with their conquerors, and that sometimes the most important strength was the willingness to be kind. In the end, Humanity's greatest weapon had never been technology or tactics. It had been their capacity to see potential where others saw only problems, to offer friendship where others offered only fear. And in a galaxy